You know, when we think of the heroes of the Cuban Missile Crisis, we usually picture presidents and premiers in their war rooms. We think of Kennedy, of Khrushchev, the guys with their fingers on the button. But what if I told you the single most important decision of that whole crisis, the one that really saved us, wasn't made in Washington or Moscow at all? What if it was made by one man, trapped in a steel tube deep under the ocean?
So let's set the scene. The date is October 27th, 1962. It's a day historians now call Black Saturday, and for good reason. The world was at DEFCON 2. That is literally one single step away from total, civilization-ending nuclear war. An American spy plane had just been shot down over Cuba. U.S. generals were practically begging for an invasion, and Fidel Castro was telling Khrushchev to launch a preemptive nuclear strike. Everything, and I mean everything, was spiraling towards Armageddon.
But the real story, the one that actually decided it all, wasn't happening in the headlines. No, it was a secret drama playing out in the total darkness of the Sargasso Sea, where a lone Soviet submarine was being hunted down.
Let's talk about this sub. It was the Soviet B-59. It was on a secret mission to help set up a new submarine base in Cuba. But then the crisis exploded, and it got caught, trapped, by a massive U.S. Navy task force. We're talking an aircraft carrier, the USS Randolph, and at least 11 destroyers. The B-59 was completely cut off, totally blind, and utterly alone. Now, on board, you've got two critical officers. There's Valentin Savitsky. He's the captain of the submarine. But then there's Vasili Arkhipov. He was the flotilla commander, which made him the senior officer. Now, they were technically the same rank, but Arkhipov had the final say. And that tiny detail of naval command, that little piece of bureaucracy, was about to become the most important fact on the entire planet. Because the B-59 was carrying a little secret, something the Americans knew absolutely nothing about. You see, of its 22 torpedoes, one of them was a so-called special weapon, a T-5 tactical nuclear torpedo, and its payload was 15 kilotons.
Just let that sink in for a second. A single weapon with the exact same power that completely leveled the city of Hiroshima. And it's on a submarine being hunted by an American fleet that has zero clue it's even there. If that torpedo launched, it wouldn't have just been one explosion. It would have kicked off a full-blown thermonuclear war. Game over.
So, to really understand the decision that was about to be made, you have to picture what it was like inside that submarine. The B-59 wasn't just a warship anymore. It had become a claustrophobic, failing, underwater pressure cooker, basically a floating hell. This submarine was designed for the freezing waters of the Arctic, right? But now it's stuck in the tropical Sargasso Sea. The air conditioning was dead. Temperatures in the engine rooms soared to nearly 150 degrees Fahrenheit. The sub had been underwater for days trying to hide, so CO2 levels were becoming toxic. Men were literally just fainting at their posts. Water was rationed to one single cup a day. The entire crew was sick, exhausted, and at their breaking point. And then, at 5 p.m. on that same Black Saturday, the world outside their hull just started exploding. An American destroyer, the USS Beale, started dropping depth charges right on top of them. To the men inside, who had no radio contact with Moscow, this wasn't some signal to come to the surface. This was an attack. As one officer, Vadim Orlov, later put it, it felt like being trapped inside a metal barrel while someone relentlessly pounded it with a sledgehammer. And this went on for 4 straight hours. I mean, put yourself in the captain's mind for a second. You're trapped, you're suffocating, it's hotter than an oven, and for hours, explosives have been going off all around your ship. What's the logical conclusion? It's that World War III has already started. And Captain Savitsky, completely exhausted and absolutely furious, just screamed, "Maybe the war has already started up there. We're going to blast them now. We will die, but we will sink them all. We will not disgrace our Navy." He gave the order. Prepare the nuclear torpedo. But wait, there was a protocol. Now, on most Soviet subs, you only needed 2 guys to fire a nuke, the captain and the political officer. But the B-59, it was different. Since it was the flagship and the flotilla commander was on board, it required unanimous agreement from all 3 senior officers. This one little rule, it was the world's last fragile line of defense. So, the stage is set. Right there in that cramped, sweltering control room, you have 2 officers, pushed beyond their limits, convinced that war has begun, and you have one man standing in their way. The first vote comes from Captain Savitsky.
He believed he was under a lethal attack. For him, the decision was obvious. He voted yes. The first key was turned.
The second vote came from the political officer, Ivan Maslenikov. His job was to uphold the Soviet cause against what he saw as an imperialist attack. He also voted yes. The second key was turned. The launch was now just one word away from happening. Every man in that control room turned to Vasili Arkhipov. With the entire weight of the world on his shoulders, he said no.
But why? How did he stay so calm when everyone else was cracking? Well, it turns out, just 1 year earlier, Arkhipov had been the executive officer on another submarine, the K-19, when it had a catastrophic nuclear reactor failure. He had watched his own men sacrifice themselves to stop a meltdown, and then he watched them die. These slow, agonizing deaths from radiation poisoning.
You see, Arkhipov had seen nuclear horror with his own eyes. It wasn't some abstract concept to him. It was the memory of his friends' faces. And this gave him a kind of moral authority and a calm that no one else in that room had. He argued that if war had really started, they'd all be dead already. He reasoned, he argued, and finally, he persuaded Captain Savitsky to stand down.
And with that, the argument was over. The B-59 surfaced into the cool night air. The immediate crisis was over, but the story was just beginning. And it was a story that would remain a secret for decades.
So when the crew got back home, they weren't treated like heroes, not even close. They were met with shame and disgrace for being forced to surface. A senior admiral actually said to Arkhipov, "It would have been better if you'd gone down with your ship." The crew thought they had failed. Meanwhile, the truth, that they had literally saved the world, was buried as a state secret. I mean, look at this timeline. The event happens in 1962. Vasili Arkhipov died in 1998. A quiet, retired vice admiral, his incredible act totally unknown to the world. It wasn't until a 40th anniversary conference in 2002 that the real story was finally told by another officer from the submarine.
The American officials at that conference, I'm talking about people like the former Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, they were absolutely stunned. They never knew how close they had all come to total annihilation. As Thomas Blanton of the U.S. National Security Archives said it best, the lesson from this is that a guy called Vasili Arkhipov saved the world.
And really, that just leaves us all with the question. In a moment of absolute panic, when every instinct you have and every single person around you is screaming for action, do you think you'd have the clarity, the character, the courage to be the one person who says no?
And so, another chapter closes. For more journeys into history's forgotten files, please like and subscribe. Your next story awaits.